Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Fringe North podcast. My name is Garrett Ryan. I am with Artist Relations this year for the Fringe North Festival 2022. I am very off in my years. I am joined today by Skye Smith. Skye, if you want to take a moment to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Skye Smith. I am with Garrett, and that the last 2 years have just been, they have not happened. So I'm still in 2022, 2020 as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a mom of two boys. I'm an artist, an actor, a dancer, scriptwriter, and I'm really excited to be a part of Fringe North this year. That's me.
Awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you on board, and so we're bringing you in through the artist in residency program as well. So that's super exciting. I know last year we had some great people brought in through that program, and we're so excited to have you on board. I know I believe Tova had seen your production and talked to me about it, and it sounds really exciting. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that production?
Sure. Yeah. So there was a call out to artists locally in Sault Ste. Marie for the Stories Steeped in Stone series through Wendy Hamilton. And when I saw it, we were in the midst of a lockdown. I was feeling like I had for 2 years not really done anything, been in any plays. So I immediately said I have to do something, and I wanted to dance. So I have recently been introduced to contemporary dance, which is a dance that I didn't get to do when I was younger. So Amelia Stewart, the choreographer of my piece, I partnered with her and said, I want to do something. Let's partner. And then in January as well, my Nona passed away, and I found myself grieving and being hit with the grief more than I expected. And a big part of it, and many people are probably familiar with this, is that we had to have a very small goodbye ceremony for her because we were in a lockdown. So the way that I grieved is I found myself wearing her old clothes. I was drinking, and still am, the way she drinks her coffee is Stovetop Espresso. I was drinking her tea, making foods that she would make her bolognese sauce, and trying to be her as a way to grieve her. So then it became this, I'm going to become my Nona in this dance piece, in this contemporary dance piece. So La Nona e Qui is the piece that I created that is Nona is here, translated from Italian, it's Nona is here, and it's a Nona making a meal, getting caught up in her kitchen, and it's an everyday meal that she serves to her family. So that's the dance piece that I created. And then I was also working with Northern Arts Academy at the time and teaching these wonderful teenage actors in the Actors Toolbox class. I also said to them, do you want to be a part of this Story Steeped in Stone? They said, yes. I had this idea for the steelworker's wife, and it coincided perfectly with La Nona e Qui because my Nono was a steelworker, and so she was a steelworker's wife. So I wrote these 4 vignettes of, there's one steelworker's wife, there's one steelworker, there's the lunch lady who works at Algoma Steel, and one more steelworker's wife that performs of these monologues. So we performed it for Stories Steeped in Stone on June 9th. I was really proud with the way that it went, very exciting. And I said to Tova, who was the MC that night, I said, I want to do this again. Let's see if we can make this work in Fringe North. And she said, yes, absolutely. So here we go. Both performances will be sometime in the festival in August.
Great. First of all, but all of it sounds beautiful. I'm very interested in the idea of, I think art is such a great tool to process those sort of heavy emotions. And I definitely relate to the idea of having a loved one pass away during pandemic and having that kind of weird. My grandfather passed away like a week or two, like very, very shortly before the pandemic started. So
Oh, I'm sorry.
it's in some ways it's kind of nice because he was in the hospital, and if he was in the hospital when COVID started, it would have been not a good time. We wouldn't have been able to visit, all those things. But on the other hand, it is tough because we never had a funeral. We never, like, it wasn't a possibility. So I think it's beautiful that being in that situation, you're using art as a tool to process some of those emotions. And yeah, that sounds. I'm so excited. I'm so looking forward to seeing the piece. The
Thank you.
pieces.
And somebody at the performance who was close with my Nona, he said, if it weren't during a lockdown, there would have been so many people visiting and saying goodbye to her. Usually, especially a big Italian funeral, you would have the wake on the Friday evening, and anybody can come
Yeah.
and see. You can talk to people, you can hear stories, you can, so, and I found myself wanting to be really, really close to my family, and we couldn't. So it was really, many people can relate. It's hard, but then it's harder
Yeah.
during the pandemic, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm curious. So, were you born in Sault Ste. Marie?
Yep. Born and raised.
Awesome. I know.
Yeah.
That Sioux has
And
a very big Italian population. Um,
yes.
so so I'm not Italian, but when I'm currently in Toronto. When I first moved to Toronto, I lived with a wonderful Italian family, took me in. So I have experienced some of those like big Italian get-togethers and Italian cooking sessions, and it's unparalleled. It's such a unique and wonderful experience to be a part of those like giant family get-togethers, like 30 people, so loud and just like energetic. So that was in Toronto, though. I'm curious. What was it like growing up within an Italian family in Northern Ontario? Like what? Yeah, tell me a little bit about growing up.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So my Nona and a lot of people she knew, they immigrated to Sault Ste. Marie so she came when she was 18 years old with her mother, and they have people from her hometown that came with her as well. So they stayed really close. And near the steel plant in the West End, there was an Italian community that stayed. A lot of them learned English, and in the 1950s, a lot of them hadn't learned English. So there's also these wonderful stories that I based my vignettes on for The Stoker's Wife by Ray Stortini. He wrote this book. He is my Nona's age. She passed away last year, so he's 90. Oh my goodness, he's 93 years old. And he got a chance to come see the performance on June 9th, and his stories were so relatable for me. He had this one really wonderful story, and a little bit sad. So it just relates to my mom. So I used it in the script. She was born in Sault Ste. Marie, and they named her Rosanna, my mom. Whilst in school, her teachers decided, and it happened to so many people, that she wasn't going to be Rosanna. She was going to be Roseanne. And that she came home from school saying, my teachers want me to write Roseanne on my pages with an E on the end instead of an A. So there's so many stories like that where Amelia was changed to Emily, or just to Canadianize these people, right? And so he has a story similar to that in his. So I used that in The Steelworker's Wife. So, growing up, my mother was the daughter of somebody who immigrated. I'm the granddaughter, so she met somebody who's non-Italian, and so even though I'm half or a quarter Italian, I feel like I'm so much more than that because I grew up experiencing Italian
Oh,
culture,
for
Italian
sure.
food,
It's
Italian music.
yeah.
Mhm.
Culture is the biggest thing. It doesn't like the blood aspect or anything like that doesn't matter. It's how you're raised.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's so funny. So, but my siblings and I did the 23andMe,
Hmm.
and we all have different percentages of Italian. And one of my siblings has like 9%, and it's like, well, that's not, that's so silly. It's
Hmm.
because we feel like we are, and we grew up experiencing everything, and it's wonderful that they were able to bring that and keep some traditions alive in the stew. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's all like affiliating with the culture. If you grew up in the culture, it doesn't matter what the 23andMe says or anything like that.
exactly,
Yeah, absolutely.
exactly. And
Um,
one huge thing. Oh, so one more thing to add to that is that food for Italian and for many cultures is love.
yeah.
So I even find myself like my Nona the simplest things she would make were so wonderful. She would make hamburgers,
Hmm.
homemade, and they were the best. They were, you couldn't have a hamburger like that. And I find myself when I became a mom realizing how important it is, how we nourish ourselves and how we nourish our loved ones. And I just kind of took on that role of, I'm planning suppers. I want to do that just the way that my Nona did as well.
Yeah, I feel very similar. So I can relate on a number of things. I think just the experience of you talked about your Nona was a steel worker. So I can relate on the idea of like growing up in the kind of blue collar Northern Ontarian family, but also you mentioned about the names changing. I have very similar stories in my family as well. My mom's family is Ukrainian, and they had a similar thing where they basically the one half of the family that's opened like businesses and stuff and had their names on businesses had to um, like anglicize their names because people wouldn't have come to support the businesses. Like their last name is like the Ukrainian version of their last name is Ivesyuk, but they had to change it to like Evanson, I believe, is the so it just like really anglicize it, which is so
Sure.
it's so interesting, but it's so sad that that had to be the case. And I hope the new immigrants coming to Canada are facing that less, but I don't really know, to be honest. Um,
Same. Same. I wouldn't know. Actually, I
uh,
know that they do have a hard time, and I have some friends that work in that field just solely to make people feel comfortable that come here. So
yeah,
I'm sure that there are a lot of stigmas and a lot of racism that still exists.
yeah, I wonder about the Northern Ontarian context specifically because I know somewhere like here living in Toronto, it's so multicultural and there's communities for every or more or less for every group that's coming here. People can find support systems and that's not necessarily the case in Northern Ontario. Um, like it's great that like now the Sioux has such a big and established Italian community, but I imagine like I remember so I'm from North Bay, and I remember when the Syrian refugees were coming in, and we had like one or two families, and very nice, wonderful people. But I know they they really stuck out in North Bay, and I felt really bad for them because I remember people. There was like articles of people like watching them go sledding for the first time. Like it's just like just leave them alone and let them like. They, there's a difference between like being welcoming and just kind of like looking at them like they're on exhibit. It was kind of strange.
Oh, interesting for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they are experiencing things for the first time, but they don't necessarily want to have that showcase, right? To
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it was something that always struck me as a little odd. But I think um, there I think that the demographics are shifting in Northern Ontario a little bit, like slowly, but that's good, and hopefully people in the future don't feel pressured to abandon their like some of their cultural ties to assimilate,
Hmm.
and can be equally Northern Ontarian and equally strong in their ethnic identities as well.
Yes, and it's funny that it, over 70 years. The script that I wrote is from the 1950s, and
Hmm.
there was there's a really exciting, cool story, sad story of an immigrant that killed her husband in Sault Ste. Marie.
Mm.
And there was a documentary made about it, and I referenced it in the plays. And there was a news article that Ray Stortini wrote about it that said, the headline was "Those hot-blooded Italians." So one woman who was in a very abusive
Hmm.
situation, not necessarily because she was Italian, but she was in this, she felt that she had no other choice, was considered, and then the whole Italian population had to overcome this stigma.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so sad. Well,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
very interested. This all of this work you're doing sounds super interesting and
Thank
something that I'm very
you.
passionate about. Like I love exploring. I love exploring any Northern Ontarian stories, but especially some of the more specific Northern Ontarian stories that aren't represented as frequently. Like I'm that's
Thanks.
great work that you're doing.
And I really wanted to portray the steelworker's wife and how there's
Mhm.
been so many changes over the years. They, that was right when they formed a union, and how it impacted the wives, because they, if their husbands were working these really long shifts, these 12-hour shifts, and then coming home and working at home, like my Nono dug his basement
Mm.
and built his home. So he would work this 12-hour shift, come home and dig his basement. They worked so hard for me
Hmm.
and for them to be here, right? And how did that affect my Nona? She was the sole caregiver. She would have been, you know, she would have had a very important role that I still feel like today isn't necessarily um, showcased or seen. The
Hmm.
stay-at-home mom is really, it's a tough job, but not recognized, I guess, still today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see pictures of, I can think of one kind of classic picture that a lot of my family has of some of my Ukrainian ancestors when they first came. They came to Manitoba, but in Manitoba, and the husband and the wife are both like impossibly big and strong looking. Like just the work that they were doing, like I'm like, it's just like unbelievable. Like they look like bodybuilders, but they're just like farmers.
Yes.
It's wild.
And my Nona, she was a little bit shorter than me, but
Hmm.
she was strong. She would
Yeah.
come, so like we have a cottage on St. George Island. She would go into the bush. She would come out with this firewood. She would come out with trees. And
Yeah.
I'm like, Nona, put that down. She was, in her 80s. She'd be doing
Yeah.
that. Just, yeah, well, this needs to get done. We need firewood for the fire. That's
Yeah.
crazy. The work never stops. And she found that
Exactly.
that was just a part of her. Yeah.
No, it was a different era. I
Yeah.
same had my great grandmother who she lived until I was about 14, I think. So I totally grew up with her, which is great. She lived until
Oh, wonderful.
just before 100. But in her like mid to late 90s, we would drive by her house and see her like on her roof, like ripping out shingles and stuff. And we're like, get down from there. What are you doing? You can get people to do that for you. It's so funny. Just
Incredible.
yeah.
I hope to be that, like
Yeah,
that's my
yeah,
goal. Is I hope to still be able and willing. It's willing. It's not
yeah,
even just able to do that. It's nope, this got to be get done, so I'm going to do it.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So, are you working with? I know you mentioned you had like a choreographer and stuff. Like, what does your kind of crew look like? Do you have a bunch of collaborators, or how many people are you working with on these pieces?
Yeah. So it was me and the choreographer
Right.
for my piece, So Nona Qui. And in hindsight, I probably would have had a director, because I found myself for the beginning and the end having some blocking that I needed to do. So the vision in my head was to have the dance come out spontaneously. So the beginning is me very matter of factly acting,
Hmm.
being in a kitchen, going into a dance, then finishing and coming out of that as though it's that space when you're in the kitchen and you're cooking where you totally get enveloped in the art of it. You know, it's an art form in itself when you're cooking and you're creating.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted the dance to showcase that in the time that one pot meal would take on the stove. So I would have had somebody look at that beginning and end, and I was really thankful to have Loretta Durat as a part of Stories Steeped in Stone, and she was there kind of overseeing the other acts that were in it, and she was able to help me with that. I just kind of took her aside and said, so what do you think about this? What about this? And a big thing in Le Non Écuit is that my back is facing to the audience, but I'm breaking the rules because that's what my mother would have seen her mother do. And she would have come into the kitchen and she would have seen her back at the stove. So I didn't want people to necessarily see what I was doing on the stove. I wanted people to be a little kid again, watching their mother, watching their Nona at the stove. So she understood that and she said, okay, yes, but we do need to see something. So, there was a time when I made it look like, gave it the impression that it was a very small kitchen that they would have had. So I was facing the audience a little bit. So Loretta Durat is on board as going to help me with directing and kind of that piece. I have 4 actors in The Steelworker's Wife. So there were 4 teenagers that I worked with in the Actors Toolbox class. One can't make it. She just happens to be out of town. So one of the students' moms, small world, I directed her 12 years ago in a breast cancer awareness play. She's on board to be the lunch lady. She said, yep, I'll do it. So she happens to be one of the actors' moms. So she's going to be replacing. And Amelia Stewart, she was the choreographer, but her role is pretty well done. It's choreographed. I may have her come in and correct me on some things and polish, but that's pretty well the crew. I do need to get a prop made, depending on the location for this performance. I need a stove, and for Stories Steeped in Stone, I used a real heavy 1950s stove that is not well transportable. So I may have to think about that. But I had the stage manager that worked with me in Stories Steeped in Stone. She made me a countertop with a window.
Cool. That's
really representational, but really was integral. And integral to the piece. I needed to be at the window, and I needed to be chopping, and I needed to be prepping the meal. So I will need some sort of props person. So I'm thinking about that. But yeah, that's it. It started with me and then grew.
That's so exciting. Yeah. Definitely putting on my artist relations hat. Definitely let me know about props and stuff, and we'll see what we can do to help you with that as well.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, representational stove would be it. The pot goes on the stove, and like a 4-burner stove, and the coffee is cool. An important part. The stovetop percolator coffee that a lot of grandmas and Nonas use and still use, and I still use, and it's the best espresso. Even I've got, I had different machines. My parents loved the Espresso. This stovetop coffee is the best.
Did you have one of those like big kind of ceramic percolator type?
I'll show you. I'll show you what it is.
I feel like I probably had a very similar one growing up. Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. Okay, I'm thinking of a different thing, but that's great as well. Yeah. So that would be more specifically for like espresso. Like
this is espresso coffee.
Very nice.
It makes it strong, and so the water goes inside. There's a small basket. It's like waste-free because you don't need any liners or anything. You put the coffee in there. The heat gets the cold water, brings it up through the coffee, so you get this very strong, simple, easy to make coffee. It's beautiful. It's the best.
Percolator coffee is the best for sure. I used to do like the French press stuff, but it doesn't get as strong. You get the percolator stuff. You let it let it go for a little while. Yeah, great, strong coffee.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find this the easiest. You can't, like, I haven't been able to mess it up, which is,
Mhm.
which is cool too.
Yeah.
And it may even be, it's funny, it may even be in my blood that this coffee, my Nona drank it, my
Yeah.
mother drank it, like, this is what I meant to have.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Cool, very cool. So I we spent a lot of time chatting about. I wanted to. I should have asked you this right at the beginning. It's kind of a weird order, but I'm curious just to know a little bit about your journey into like your artistic journey. Like, how did you get to this point today? I know you've mentioned a little bit about some of your training or collaborations in the past, but what led you into doing this kind of work?
I was a dancer first, so I grew up dancing competitively.
Right.
In university, I took music and voice specifically, is where I met Aggie McCarthy, and
Mhm.
I've worked for her for the past 6 or 7 years at Northern Arts Academy. She opened a wonderful music school. She's a teacher, and her husband is as well. He's a piano player, so they're a great partnership. And for the last 7 years, I've been doing the Triple Threat program there, which is teaching kids acting, dancing, and singing in an hour on Saturdays. So it is a wonderful program, and I'm fully supportive of it. And I've just resigned from that position this year, so spend more time with my kids.
Yeah.
My 4-year-old son, he goes to school in September, so he's being away from him on Saturdays too is really struck me as, no, I can't do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So growing up, I was in community theater.
Mhm.
My first play was when I was 6 years old. My mother got me involved in The Wizard of Oz. I was a munchkin. And dance, I took music, and the acting has been completely through community theater. I've learned that way. So I was in a lot of farces with a small theater company here called Family Life Theater. We also did a lot of educational plays that I was really passionate about. We toured them throughout a bunch of reserves in Northern Ontario that basically were social issues of concern that we were just bringing awareness to. So,
Yeah.
and then I directed the breast cancer awareness play for Family Life Theater. I was in a play about elder abuse. That was a really hard one.
Mhm.
And continued my community theater. The most recent one I was in was Cats. I got to play Bombalurina with
Mhm.
the Musical Comedy Guild. That was a really, really great. And I felt it just brought everything together, that, dancing, acting, singing. It was such a wonderful play for me to own my craft, I guess. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I had a 2-year hiatus basically from the pandemic. And then, like I mentioned earlier, when I saw that call out to artists, I knew I needed to perform again. And I've done different roles in community theater. I've done a little bit of backstage. I've done mostly performing, a little bit of directing, and my place I've realized is on stage. I really, really enjoy that. I enjoy directing too, but I definitely feel more pressure directing. I very much like to be told what to do. I like to be told, somebody to tell me, this is what I see, this is what I want to do, and I love to deliver that. So yeah, that's my, it took me a while to realize what I wanted to do. And, depending on, there were so many factors involved in it, right? Because acting or performing is the least paid. It's all, it's
Yeah.
one of those positions, especially in community theater, it's probably one of the only that isn't. And I thought, well, it's got to feed my soul,
Mhm.
basically. So that's why I decided that that performing would be what I needed to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, then La Nona was created, and The Steelworker's Wife too. So that was one of my first writing, one of my first scripts. I've done some here and there, but I definitely enjoy it too. And I find myself through other hardships thinking, it percolates in your brain, right? these
Yeah.
ideas that have to come out. So that's what I like enjoy about script writing, is that it needs to come out somehow, and I need other people to understand
Hmm.
it, and I feel like other people will relate to. We're all human. We're all broken. So this is my way. This is my way of coping with
Yeah.
those things, those hardships. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for being here today. I guess we can wrap up now. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think if anybody who's watching and listening, come out to Fringe North. There's going to be so many wonderful acts. I'm so thrilled to be a part of it. And thanks, Garrett, for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Yes, so Fringe North will be from August 18th to the 21st. Tickets will be available on August 1st. We have a whole great selection of digital and in-person content. You can see productions like the Nona and The Steelworker's Wife, and a whole slew of other amazing shows from amazing artists. So definitely come out and check that out. You can find information on our social media and on our website, which I have in my name here, which is SueFringe.com. So thank you so much again, Skye, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Garrett.
Fringe North runs from August 18th to the 21st. This year, Fringe will be a hybrid festival, so there will be both in-person and digital offerings. To stay updated and learn more, visit SueFringe.com. We are always looking for volunteers to help out in various areas. If you are interested in volunteering during this year's activities, email SueFringe@gmail.com. Like what we're doing? Don't forget to tip the Fringe at paypal.me/FringeNorth so that we can continue to help support artists, or e-transfer to SueFringe@gmail.com.